My name is Steve Zeltzer, and I'm with Labor Fest, which is a annual festival in San Francisco, month-long festival to commemorate the San Francisco General Strike in 1934. This is our 30th anniversary of the festival, and the festival, besides covering the struggle of workers in the United States, unions in San Francisco nationally, has also been an international festival. And that is what we see the struggle of workers around the world as part of the working class in the United States and of America, because workers in the United States are connected to workers all over the world. And that is one of the reasons that from its inception, we linked up Labor Fest with these struggles here and around the world, and not only today with the Palestinian workers and our brothers and sisters, but also and siblings, but also Chilean workers. We're having the president of the Healthcare Workers Union of Chile tonight in San Francisco, talking about privatization and the 50th anniversary of the coup in Chile in 1973, which was organized not only by the US government to overthrow Allende, but also by the AFL-CIO leadership. So this connection, unfortunately, between workers in this country and their unions and workers around the world is very much connected with the AFL-CIO and the US government. And we're going to be seeing that, I'm sure, in the discussion we're going to be having today. So I am also a producer of Work Week in San Francisco, KPOO Black Community Radio Station, and also a Pacifica producer on Capitalism, Race, and Democracy on Pacifica, and Working Voices LA in a labor program in Los Angeles. And I have been producing labor media since for decades, and video and audio. So one of the things that is important is to break the information blockade. And that's certainly the case on this subject today, because the issue of Palestinian workers and their struggle of the justice and equality in Palestine for the workers and people of Palestine is very much connected to the struggle of workers around the world and the fight here, very much so. So I just returned from a convention of the CWA, Communication Workers of America. I'm with a member of the Pacific Media Workers Guild in San Francisco, and we were able to introduce a resolution for Mumia Abu-Jamal to free him, journalist. He was a public radio and a member of CWA in Philadelphia, actually, in public radio. And he was, of course, framed up and has been in prison. And also we introduced a resolution for Julian Assange. And the resolution on Mumia was rejected. They said it had incorrect facts. They didn't send it out to the members. There was a debate on the resolution for Julian Assange at the convention. And although it was supported by the leadership of my union, the News Guild, they didn't really get the information out to the delegates, and it was defeated 38-31. They did pass a resolution in support of a Washington journalist with the Wall Street Journal that he be freed from, and they dropped the charges against him, espionage charges, the Russians. So it shows really kind of, in my view, a double standard. Here we talk about freeing a journalist, American journalist in Russia, but we are unable, the unions are unable to speak up about Julian Assange, who through WikiLeaks exposed the crimes of US imperialism, and also about Mumia Abu-Jamal, the need to free him after many decades in prison. And the struggle of a fight for justice of Palestinian workers has a long history in the United States, and we're going to be talking about some of that history. And what we'd like to come out of this discussion is actually some action plans to deepen the fight in the unions, deepen the fight of solidarity for Shireen Abu Akleh, and also to defend the Palestinian Americans and programs, education programs like the program of RABAB ABDULHADI, who is here on the program. So without further ado, I want to introduce Nora Corey, who's one of the supporters of this event, and she can introduce our first guest. So, and Nora is with the Palestinian Solidarity Network and has been a strong activist and a member of the Green Party in support of Palestinians. Welcome, Nora.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you all for being here. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of our friends that are all over the world. And I'm really honored today to be here amongst you all and hearing from all the connections that Steve just mentioned and introduced. And yeah, just really important that we're connecting these dots in these most perilous times, and just honored to be with all of you to discuss next steps and how we can move forward together under these really trying times. So it is my honor to introduce Shireen Abu Akleh, who's here with us today from, I believe, Dubai. And she is a tireless advocate for human rights and justice for her aunt Shireen Abu Akleh, Allah yarhamha, since her murder by Israeli forces in May 2002. Her advocacy has been focused on demanding justice and that the U.S. government open up an investigation into her death, independent investigation, and has been meeting with policymakers, including Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, and even Pope Francis. So she'll share updates with us today about the campaign and ways we can get involved and take action, inshallah. Lina, please take you from here.
Thank you so much, Nora, and thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me in this important event and for having this space for us to talk about various struggles, especially important ones that require action from everyone and support. And I appreciate that even after a little over a year now, after my dear aunt was killed, that she's still being remembered, she's still being honored. And we have these communities, these organizations that continue to shed light on what happened to Shireen, but also to remember her and remember what she stood for. So for those who don't know or haven't heard, which I'd be shocked by now, but millions around the world, they knew Shireen as the voice of Palestine. She was the voice of truth, voice of justice. She was a proud Palestinian American journalist for Al Jazeera. She spent her entire life reporting on injustices Palestinians face, as well as their dreams, accomplishments, and the beauty of Palestine. For her, it wasn't just injustices. She always wanted to uplift Palestinians, uplift their stories, and show the world a different side of Palestine, but at the same time, make sure that their message is heard around the world. Shireen spent her entire life, she dedicated her entire life for the cause of Palestine, because not only was she was doing this because, as she said, she wanted to be close to the people. And this was her way of getting their voices heard across the world. And ever since May 11, our entire lives have changed. It's been a little over a year now that since we woke up to the absolute worst news of our entire lives. We woke up to the news that Shireen was killed by an Israeli soldier while she was on duty at Jenin refugee camp. She was wearing her press vest. She was wearing a helmet. She was fully identified as a journalist, and yet she was targeted her alongside her colleagues. She was shot at around 16 times. And the one bullet that shot her changed our entire lives forever. Ever since then, there was a life before Shireen, and then there was a life after Shireen. It's still very difficult for our family to comprehend this loss. I don't think we will ever get over it. I don't think we will ever get used to visiting her at the cemetery every Saturday. But we continue to honor her. We continue to commemorate her and remember her legacy, because what she left behind is something that that I don't think will ever be forgotten. She was a legend. She will always be a legend, and legends are not forgotten. Shireen was professional at what she did. She knew how to get close to the people. She was always there for the people, and she wasn't just there to cover the news, but she was also there to be close to the people. And this is something that continues to be remembered about her. She was empathetic, compassionate, and these are some of the characteristics that I learned from her. She was my role model ever since I was a kid. I remember sitting next to her while she would be reporting from home. I would borrow her notebooks that had all the reportings on them. And I learned about Palestine from Shireen. She would always talk to me about different historical moments, different incidents, different events. She would come back from a long day in the field to tell us about the stories, the people she met, the children she spoke to, and the stories she was covering. But also she was enthusiastic about the stories that she was preparing for. Few weeks before she was killed, we were sitting in the living room, and she was telling me about the different stories that she was thinking about working on. And she was telling me, what do you think about this? Do you have any ideas that you think would be nice to cover, something different? So she was always eager to do something new, something different. But she didn't only inspire me. She also inspired countless of millions, I would say, of young girls and women who wanted to become journalists and pursue careers in journalism. Especially that Shireen was someone who broke and she shattered gender norms. She was one of the first Arab women to work in the field in conflict zones, especially in wars. She covered various events, whether it's most of the wars, the assaults on Gaza, the Intifada, on the Intifada, and also different incursions, raids on the West Bank. But for Shireen, Jenin was always a story, was always a place that remained so close to her heart. And over the past year, my family and I, we have been trying to grieve. We've been trying to grieve while at the same time seeking justice for Shireen, calling for accountability for this war crime that was committed by Israel. From the beginning, we called on the US government to act in the same way it would if Shireen was killed abroad in a different country under different circumstances. And after 6 months of our continuous work of traveling from one country to another, meeting with various members of Congress, meeting with so many people on the Hill, and calling simply for justice, something that it's not our role to do. And after 6 months, news broke that the United States had opened a federal criminal investigation into Shireen's killing. And for us, this was a big step. We see that as a success. And we welcomed this news, and we continue, but our family continues until this day to pursue justice for Shireen, whether it's from the halls of the US Congress to the International Criminal Court. It's been an entire year since Shireen was murdered, and until this day, she continues to be remembered, and our family continues to fight for justice. It was only 2 months ago we were back on the Hill meeting with senators. We held a press conference on the Hill to continue to demand justice for Shireen. Until there's no justice for Shireen, journalists will continue to be targeted, and we saw this in the latest and most recent assault on the Jenin refugee camp a few weeks ago. We saw how journalists continue to be targeted. We saw how cameras were attacked, and that should say a lot, and especially that it happened in Jenin refugee camp. There's no justice for Shireen, which means journalists continue to be targeted, which means there's still no accountability, and the perpetrators have to be held accountable. So these indiscriminate crimes are stopped. And for our family, accountability means that this not only the soldier who killed her to be held accountable, to be in prison, but also for whoever it was that gave that order, for the entire chain of command that perpetuates this kind of violence against civilians and against journalists. Journalists at the end of the day are doing their job, their duty that is protected under international law. They're exercising their right to press. And it was very unfortunate that Shireen was never mentioned during the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year, even though we've heard how the president praises and continues to call for the protection of female journalists, especially in war zones, yet Shireen was never mentioned. And that makes us wonder, does that make her less of an American because she's Palestinian? So for us, it's important that we have these spaces that allows us to share, to talk about Shireen. And from our family to everyone, we continue to ask you to talk about Shireen, write about her, continue talking to your representatives, legislators, policymakers who can and who have the power to make a difference, no matter how small, how big it is. Anything is always appreciated, and it's only through these kind of efforts where we will always remember Shireen and honor her. Nothing we ever will do, nothing ever will bring Shireen back, but at least we know that their justice will be served. For us, for me especially, I'm a bit of an optimist because she was a very optimistic person, full of joy, full of happiness, always looks forward to life. And I'm trying to gain some optimism, some hope from her, that justice will be served. Because I always used to ask her, and I remember this very vividly, we were crossing one of the military checkpoints going from Ramallah, West Bank to Jerusalem. And I was telling her, Shireen, do you think that this will ever and do you think we will ever be liberated, we will ever be free? And she said, yes, of course, all empires fall and we will see this happen. So for me, I always try to remember that. I always try to be hopeful that one day I'll wake up and I'll know that there is justice for Shireen and for others who have been killed. And Shireen wasn't the first journalist, and she wasn't the last. And until there is no justice for Shireen, as I mentioned, journalists will continue to be targeted. People will continue to be targeted, and not just under the Israeli occupation, but other governments will see that targeting journalists will get the green light that they can hurt journalists, they can harm them, and they will not be held accountable. So again, thank you all for listening, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Lina. I know how much it is for you to be here and to be remembering her all this time while your family and you would rather be grieving. But we really appreciate your words and energy, and we'll do everything in our power, inshallah, to work together to continue her legacy and demand justice moving forward.
Thank you so much, Nora.
So I think next we're going to introduce Syed ARIKAT. Next, we would like to introduce a Washington bureau chief for Al-Quds newspaper, and has recently received the Courage in Journalism Award from the ADC for his demonstrating outstanding courage, strength, and determination for his work serving as a role model in the industry, where so many are just pay lip service to the industry. So Syed, thank you for your work, and please take it from here.
Well, thank you, Nora. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dr. RABAB. It's really an amazing presentation. You know, I don't know if I'm really that prestigious of a journalist. You know, I try to do my work, and it's a work that needs to be done, whether by me or somebody else. You know, I regret that it is only me that keeps going at this age to the State Department just to raise this issue. I wish every day that we have younger journalists that would come and raise this issue, being whether they are Palestinians, Arabs, or not, you know, just to raise the issue. Because the truth is that nobody wants to talk about this issue, certainly not the State Department. The State Department would rather issue whatever statement, mundane, mainly statements and repetitive statements and so on about Israel and its right to self-defense and so on. And, yeah, from time to time, we have other journalists that actually press the issue, like my colleague from the Associated Press, Matthew Lee, that I just want to mention here, and so on, that he can press the point. It is reporting on the Palestinian issue has always been a very frustrating thing. I've done it for decades, and it has never gotten easy, or it has never gotten, you know, the kind of scrutiny that it should. You know, I mean, it is, first of all, I mean, just to mention, there has been since 1967, the Israelis not only killed 1 or 2 Palestinians, 54 Palestinian journalists have been killed. So it's a huge number, you know, that nobody talks about. As we speak today, there are 16 Palestinian journalists in prison, in Israeli prisons, for reporting on what goes on in Jenin and the other camps and so on. I mean, last week we saw very blatantly, I mean, very clearly, very graphically, how Israeli occupation soldiers treat Palestinian journalists. I mean, they beat up the journalist from Palestine TV, for instance, you know, in front of everybody. They don't care, you know, because they know that this will not really garner the kind of attention that it ought to in the West. And I tell you, I mean, you know, we talk about Shireen Abu Akleh. It is really a very poignant moment in the history that illustrates the history of Palestinian journalism and so on. Anybody that tells you that it was not intended, the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, is lying. It was intended. They went in. I know exactly how these sniper teams work. I was, you know, when I was with the UN for my hiatus from journalism for 5 years, I was the UN spokesman in Iraq, and I know, you know, fully how the sniper teams work. They go in, they go by twos, one a spotter, you know, they sit with their, you know, American supplied infrared binoculars and so on. They know every movement and so on, and they shoot one shot. You know, I'm sorry to be graphic, but that's exactly what happened. They shoot one shot to see how it goes, what is the wind direction, all that. I mean, it's a precise science. So in this case, when Shireen, you know, on May 11, and this story really ought to be told over and over again. When they went in, they shot. I mean, they passed by the contingent, by the Israeli soldiers' contingent, and they told them, "We're going to that spot," you know. So they knew exactly where they were going, and then. The spotter, you know, said that's the way they are, and they shot my colleague first, Ali Smoudi, from my newspaper, and they shot him in his shoulder, and this was the the 8th time, by the way, that he gets injured. So he still is reporting. He was reporting last week from Jenin. So they shot him in the shoulder because he was the person next to Shireen. And he also, as most Palestinian journalists, they earn living by doing so many things. He was also producing for Al Jazeera, other than reporting from, for my newspaper, Al-Quds daily newspaper. So they shot him. They knew exactly where the next shot is going to land, and they shot her right through. They know exactly what spot they're going to shoot. So all this was planned and pre-planned and approved. And so it was intentional. The reason I say this is to show the hypocrisy of the US government, that on July 4th, 22, last year, July 4th, 22, Independence Day, because they knew that nobody's going to read things on Independence Day anyway, it's a holiday. They issued a statement saying, more than likely, and that's exactly what it says, more than likely it was done by an Israeli soldier, but there was no intentionality. There was no intentionality, and that's it. That was it. All the other meetings that happened afterwards were just nonsense. They were just a crock. It was malarkey, as Biden likes to say. So they met with the Shireen family, and they know exactly that nothing's going to change. They continue to meet with her. The issue gets raised in the U.S. Senate by Senator Chris Van Hollen or others and so on, but they know nothing will happen. I raise the issue, others raise the issue, whether it's on the 1 year anniversary or any other day, nothing is going to happen because that's it. The moment the U.S. will acknowledge an American Palestinian journalist or American Palestinian, like it happened with Omar Assad, was just killed a few months before. The moment they say Israel is guilty and demand accountability, the moment Israeli exceptionalism just withers away, and they're not going to do that. So there will never be accountability. Trust me, there will never be accountability. Anytime you have a Palestinian journalist or a Palestinian American journalist like Shireen shot and killed premeditatedly, the United States will not do anything. And simply because also the United States supports all colonial movements all throughout the world. I mean, the same thing, maybe we don't have accounting of how journalists recorded on South Africa, what was happening of the struggle to end apartheid. We may not know that, but chances are that they probably would have faced the same kind of suppression and the same kind of probably erasure that RABAB mentioned, from the public view, from people and so on. So this is the United States of America. It is the hyper-imperialist power. It is the strongest imperial power. It will pursue its goals and its aims at whatever lying or whatever distortion of the truth that goes on. And unashamedly, they will continue to do it. So when you say, like this past week, you ask, I asked about the right of the Palestinians to self-defense. And they will not say that. They will not say that the Palestinians have a right to self-defense. As any group of people, they say repeatedly that Israel has the right to self-defense. I was told personally in the briefing room, for all to see, that Israel's security is sacrosanct and Israel's right to self-defense is sacrosanct, which means Israel can use all these weapons against basically an unarmed civilian population. I mean, imagine for a moment what happened in Jenin last week. What we saw Apache helicopters. That is really an amazing machine. I've seen it in person. It's an amazing machine. It's in combat, it could possibly replace a whole battalion or something like this. It has more weapons than you can imagine, used against an unarmed population, or when they use the other armored vehicles supplied by the United States of America, the Bradley vehicle, other vehicles, and they use tanks supplied by the United States, when they use guns supplied by the United States. These things have Gatling guns. I don't know if you know much about this, that go around firing like 1,500 rounds a minute and more. These big, huge 30 millimeter shells and so on. So this is what we see. This is the kind of things that the United States of America will continue to defend and say Israel has a right to defend itself. Never mind all the laws and regulations and that have been, let's say, passed by the United Nations and so on about the right of the occupied person to be protected by the occupying power. Never mind all that. We see it in Gaza. We see it in the refugee camp. Jenin has been subject to attacks for the past 20 years and so on. So when we talk about reporting on Palestine, you can bet that you will be frustrated. If you're an American journalist writing for a major American newspaper, and I have many friends, I don't want to mention their names, but I have my friends who work for the New York Times, I still work for the New York Times, or the Washington Post, I still work for the Washington Post, and others and so on. They're actually being told by their board to report within the framework of the supplied talking points of the Israeli occupation forces. I mean, very blatantly. I mean, that's what they tell you. They go and some of them are not. I mean, they are reporting what's what happened on the ground. They're not trying to skew whatever they say or to reflect a pro-Palestinian point of view and so on. Quite the contrary. They say this is really what happened, and then they are saying no, but that's no good. That is going somehow to besmirch Israel's picture in the world and so on. And so this happens time and time again, and not only the major newspapers, but publications like Slate, like others, like people who might be writing or reporting for the Daily Beast. I mean, it goes right across the spectrum of journalism. So you find, layer after layer after layer of that you have to sort of penetrate to be able to report the truth on Palestine. So that's why the targeting of Shireen Abu Akleh makes perfect sense from the Israeli point of view, because she was there, every day, every time she reported from the field. At least tens of millions of people were able to see it and so on, and that gets recorded. So, and also, I mean, if I how much time do I have, Nora? I'm sorry, I don't want to speak longer than I'm allowed.
Yeah, whenever you
Okay, thanks. Okay, whenever that's a long time. Whenever.
we're sitting
But,
for
okay, I'll try to be brief. So Palestinian journalists and those who report on what's going on in Palestine are also restricted by the Palestinian Authority. We should never forget this, because what happened, let's say last week, when the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, visited the camp of Jenin, there was all kinds of restrictions on the movement and on what was going on and so on. So we should not dismiss what's going on. We never, I mean, aside from, let's say, what we see sometimes on Al Jazeera that is being reported from the West Bank and from other places, you never hear anything about, what is going on in terms of, let's say, support of the Arab people for the Palestinian cause. You never see this. You never see it on Kuwaiti TV. You never see it on Qatari TV. You never see it on Saudi TV and so on. You hear about what's going on. For instance, in the Emirates or in Bahrain or in Morocco, you hear about, let's say, the so-called Abraham Accord. Everybody talks about the Abraham Accord and so on, which is really just a phony term for normalizations, as if somebody named Abraham was oversaw these accords and so on. But my point is, it is that the reporting on the Palestinian issue is suppressed everywhere. It is suppressed everywhere. You don't hear anything about, let's say, the support of the Arab people for the Palestinians. Although it's there, maybe in Jordan because there's a majority of Palestinians. But other than that, you hardly ever see it. You don't see a group of people writing in solidarity with the Palestinians. You don't read, you don't hear about, writers and so on. So there's this whole thing. I mean, that powers that be coming together to really prevent in any way they can the truth about Palestine. And it is something that I do face in the State Department. It is frustrating that I keep asking the same question over and over and over again. And they keep saying the same thing over and over and over again that are absolutely meaningless. They use things that, our commitment to the two-state solution, when in fact, we all know that there's no two-state solution. That ship has sailed a very, very long time ago. It's not. So, or when they say that, we are concerned, sometimes deeply concerned, and other times are very concerned, but it's, concern is the common denominator. They're concerned about the expansion of settlement, or the call on both sides. This both sidism is just an awful thing. They both sides to tone down, or both sides to de-escalate. And when you know that there's only one side that uses military force to go ahead and invade people in the middle of the night, take them out of their homes. I mean, it's in Jenin, 3,000 people were driven from their home. They were dislocated just overnight. They were pushed out, probably for the second or third time, some of them. They destroyed their home. The Israelis, instead of, let's say, sending their troops walking down the alleys of the camp because they want to protect them, what they do, they bring these huge bulldozers supplied by Caterpillar, and they destroy one home, then the next home, and then the third home, so their soldiers do not have to walk. And it's really amazing what happened. And then, they throw people out and they take their homes sometimes as a sniper nest or whatever. So this is the kind of, things that happen that really you'd hardly ever see it in the American press. You don't see it in the American press. I don't know about the other outlets, but you don't see it in the British press. You don't see it in the German press. You don't see it anywhere. When, only 3 days ago, when the Israeli occupation force went and literally ethnically cleansed a Palestinian family from their home in East Jerusalem, Sub-11 family. They took them out, threw them out, and an hour later, we had the settlers come in and take over the house, their house that they have lived in for over 70 years, the Sub-11 family. So how much news this gets? Hardly anything, hardly in space, maybe in passing, in passing. There was an article, to their credit, there was an article in the New York Times, but that's it. It ends right there. At this day and age, I mean, you go in, an occupying power, they go in, they dislocate, they take out, they replace a Palestinian family that has lived in their home, for 70 years, just reaffirming that the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe, still goes on. Still, I think it is a very important thing to report on Palestine, to muster, not only the courage, but also to muster the tenacity to do it, and to do it, against this, these layers of walls of frustrations and so on, knowing it, because you need to put this on the record. It is, I can go to my reporting 20 years ago and it is almost the same as today, the same places, the same names, the same aspects and so on. We are, the truth about Palestine, as reported by journalists worldwide, is getting a little better and becoming more available, on the internet and so on, with the new kind of media. So that gives one hope. But really, the suppression of free journalism still goes on today as ever before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saeed. And obviously, your report about not only the actual developments, circumstances of oppression and terrorism against Palestinians, but also the fear of journalists to report on it because they're fearful of being fired. That is a reality. The reason there aren't more journalists on this call is the intimidation against them. They're afraid that they'll be intimidated and harassed. And that's why I think that we have to have this discussion, because the AFL-CIO supports the Histadrut. They support military aid to Israel. They support the use of US weapons to terrorize and take away the homes of people and to destroy them. And they refuse to take a stand to demand justice for Shireen. They know she was assassinated. They know she was murdered. And there's complete silence by the AFL-CIO. Although my union, the News Guild, protested it they don't demand justice. They don't demand that they be held accountable, that they be prosecuted criminally for this murder. So that being said, our next speaker, Dr. Cornel West, has been a leading force in speaking out for Palestinians and the defense of the Palestinian people. And this, for the Democrats, has been something you don't talk about. In fact, one of the important struggles in the United States and internationally is the defense of Palestinian educators, activists on the campuses. And there's been a long struggle by the Zionists to eliminate and get rid of educators in the United States who are pro-Palestinian, who are critical of Israel. And as many know, they're trying to institute a law, a regulation that if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. And that is being used in England and other countries to actually fire faculty, professors who are supportive of the Palestinian people. And one of the important struggles in the fight for ethnic studies was at San Francisco State, 1968, where there was a strike led by the Black Student Union, Third World Committee of students to demand that they had a right to get the real history of their people, of their communities, and also for open admissions for all working class students. And that strike, 6-month strike, led to the formation first ethnic studies program in the United States, and which continues to exist and has led to programs all over the United States, which are now under attack by right-wingers and people who would like to go back to the Confederacy, actually. And they want to get rid of these programs because they don't want young people to learn about their history, and they call that wokeism. In other words, waking up to the real history is a problem for them, and that's something that is part of the struggle. So joining us is Dr. RABAB ABDULHADI. She's director of the Arab Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies at San Francisco State University. It is a program that was modeled really on the goals and aims of the strike in 1967, that ethnic studies would not be simply an academic program, but would be a program to unite education, academia, with the struggles going on in communities, in the Black community. In San Francisco, there have been the poisoning of the Black community at Hunters Point Shipyard and Treasure Island by radioactive contamination, which was a radioactive dump site. And Ray Tompkins and others from the San Francisco State Strike have been involved in that. But that struggle at the Ethnic Studies Department continues, and it is the Palestinian students, the faculty have been under attack, not only by Zionists, but by Nazis. And RABAB and her struggle to defend her program and continue it despite this harassment is very important for all educators, for all working people, and she's been supported by the San Francisco Labor Council as well. So welcome to our program, RABAB.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. I first begin by acknowledging that our campus sits on unceded, stolen indigenous people's land. And secondly, I say rest in power, rest in peace, Shireen Abu Akleh, Allah yarhamha, la ruha salam, LINA. We have never, you and I have never met, but I have known your aunt, and exactly what you are saying. Amazing, amazing beacon for the truth, and such a loving, wonderful person. And I remember many, many moments of meeting her in person in the United States and back in Palestine. So my deepest condolences and our deepest condolences. Also, I want to salute the people of Chile who have gotten rid of the dictatorship through very much struggle by themselves and the world over, and we will be maybe talking about that more. And also a big saluting for all the prisoners, whether we're talking about the prisoners here in the United States or the prisoners in Palestine, and demanding freedom immediately. And specifically now we're dealing with the case of Walid Daqqa, who is about to die if he is not moved to healthcare immediately. And there is a big campaign by the Palestinian youth movement and people in Palestine who are demanding freedom for prisoners, and also freedom and return of the bodies of the Palestinians who have been killed, assassinated by Israel, who are held in so-called number cemeteries and freezers, which actually Shireen Abu Akleh has done a few reports about that. And I remember actually watching them on Al Jazeera, very informative, amazing word of the truth. I want to, before I get into what's happening with San Francisco State, I think it's really important to connect. What does this really mean? Why is there a program today speaking about labor, speaking about Palestine, speaking about the AMED studies program, speaking about journalists and so on? And I think it boils down to the question of speaking truth to power, being able to actually speak about what's going on and having the voice to do so. And it is not an accident that, Steve, you mentioned Mumia Abu Jamal, you've mentioned Assange. We talk about, and Shireen Abu Akleh, who was executed, as you know, your father, Lina, actually said at the press conference at the Institute for Palestine Studies in Beirut recently. We were honored, privileged to be part of it. And I want to also connect it with the history of assassination of people who always speak, the organic intellectuals who speak, who produce justice for not justice-centered knowledge. And we're speaking also of Ghassan Kanafani, who was the editor of Al-Hadaf, who was also assassinated over 51 years ago. It was a few last week was the 51st anniversary of his assassination. He has never even carried a gun, and he always said my word is my gun, al-kalima al-bunduqiyya. And he was assassinated because he was speaking truth to power. We're thinking about Najil Ali, the Palestinian cartoonist, who is very much connected with us at San Francisco State because it was his drawing Hamdallah. And yesterday it was the Palestinian Feminist Collective 2 days ago published the book, children's book on Hamdallah and the drawings and so on, who drew and also was assassinated because of his work. And of course, we're talking about many people, whether we're talking about Adnan Khashoggi and others. And I think it's really important to point out, to underline what Lina was saying about the hypocrisy and the double talk by the US administration, which is not accidental, trying to cover up for Israel and so on. And I think this is where we come in as the AMED Studies Program, Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diasporas, in our effort to actually produce a program that is justice-centered, a program that has courses that educate all students, that bring up and connect the histories of all the people, from the US as a settler colonial state, to Israel as a settler colonial state, to South Africa, to New Zealand and Australia, to the rights of the people, the indigenous people, the people who were kidnapped and enslaved from Africa, to the exclusion acts, to the history of repression that has been going on. We are very much part and parcel. And this has also been exposed again and again by journalists. And I remember meeting you, Steve, at the 40th anniversary of the commemoration of the 68th strike in that room in the College of Ethnic Studies, and so inspired by you and your comrades. Some of them have departed, Damira Ahmad, Margaret Leahy, Terry Collins, many who've been the beacons of the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front, along with the labor activists, along with the professors, and demanding specifically the decolonizing of the curriculum, the dissolution of the borders between the academy and the community, and the accountability of us scholars and educators to the communities from whose lives we draw our bread and butter, and whose lives Shireen Abu Akleh was martyred as a result of covering, and so on. So there is something about the interest of colonial and repressive powers to silence the truth. Also, I think it would be really worth it to mention that just last month, Daniel Ellsberg passed away, and he was the one who also exposed the Pentagon files and the US involvement in Vietnam. And this is also was one of the dynamos that that motivated your struggle at San Francisco State in 1968. You were struggling against Vietnam. You were struggling against takeover of the land. You were struggling for the words of people to be taught. We're struggling in order for us to be able, for the students to learn about the histories of their ancestors, what's going on. And this is exactly what the forces, the neoliberal forces, the right-wing forces, the Nazis, the Zionists, the Islamophobes, the Orientalists, they all want to come together and basically prevent us from speaking truth to power, bringing out these things. And this is why we keep getting punished. This is why Professor CORNEL was penalized at Harvard University, one of the foremost authorities. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. If you think about it, it's ridiculous what has happened. But we see that again and again and again. And what I'm saying, this is a systematic pattern. This is not accidental. None of this is random. Silencing people again and again and again. And I'm just, hi, Saeed. Thank you. It's great to see you. I went before you, but I also hail your role in constantly challenging and speaking up and refusing to be silent. And I think this is one of the things that we do. We refuse to be silent. It is in our best interest to produce knowledge for justice. So this is what we have been doing. And this is part of the reason that there is a huge attack against us, is because the powers that be are very much attempting to make it impossible for us to reach people. In the case of Palestine, the Zionist movement has historically been very much interested in silencing and uncovering the narrative about Palestinian liberation in order to basically realize their so-called vision, a land without people for a people without a land. So it's not only the erasure of people from their land, it's not only the destruction of the Palestinian people, but it's also preventing our narrative, the narrative of the people of Palestine from coming out. And the Israel itself, since its founding, actually, it has one of the major concerns, security concerns, was the question of public relations. And so they've created the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. They have the whole Hasbara. They have the whole question of accusing all of us of being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, because we criticize Israel and because we actually say that Zionism is a settler colonial racist movement that seeks to displace Palestinians and remove them from their land. All truth. And the thing is that the problem I think the Zionist movement is having, and its supporters in the White House, white supremacists, the right wing, the Christian Zionists, let's just not forget, by the way, that they're very much aligned, all these forces, with each other. They are failing in kind of trying to change people's mind, and specifically because they're very upset that this is happening in the United States. This is supposed to be one of the major arenas. And the fact that public opinion polls more and more and more and showing more sympathy with the Palestinians shows that the life of Shireen Abu Akleh, the life of Ghassan Kanafani, the life of Najil Ali, the lives of everybody who is working day in and day out and struggling, and the work that all the journalists are seeking to put out there are not in vain. They are happening, but they have a very big problem, and they're getting nastier. Now, to come to our own university, we built the program because our university recruited me to build this program. We built this program. We're inspired by the spirit of 68. We developed the minor program. We've supported the students in putting the Palestinian mural honoring the late Professor Edward Said, which is absent of Hamdallah, but Hamdallah remains in our memories. We created the memorandum of understanding with An-Najah National University, only agreement San Francisco State has with anywhere around the world in the Arab or Muslim world. We created the Edward Said Scholarship. We failed into doing the study abroad to Palestine because the Zionist influence at San Francisco State and its neoliberalism and its anti-labor, anti-faculty, anti-democratic, secretive ways of doing things, lack of transparency, have basically stepped in and shut down the possibility for us doing so. However, I think it's really, really important to remember that we have been challenging all of this. We're continuing with the program, And we're continuing with the program because of many people here, because of people like Nora, because of people like you, Steve, because of Dr. West, because of Liz Milosh, because of so many people, Freedom Archives. I can't see all the names on the list here. Our supporters and our colleagues in many organizations, from Jewish Voice for Peace to the Labor Union, our own labor struggle at San Francisco State, our San Francisco Labor Council passed 3 unprecedented resolutions in terms of Palestine. And we actually grieved when we were silenced. We grieved, my colleague, Dr. Tomomi Kinekawa, and I filed grievances against the university, and we won the 2 grievances, and the university and our colleagues, a randomly selected panel of faculty ruled, 3 different panels ruled that San Francisco State is wrong, demanded that San Francisco State apologize to us, apologize for, in our case, for silencing us, for colluding with Zionist groups such as the Lawfare Project, and named it, and demanded that the open classroom that was silenced be built as soon as possible. We had another grievance that I filed because of breach of my contract with for the AMED Studies program. We also won that grievance, and my colleagues, whom I don't really know, most of them, have ruled that San Francisco State should apologize, build the AMED Studies program, end its academic intellectual isolation and the new McCarthyism that it is perpetuating against us. And so we have actually the support of thousands of people. We have the support of our students, our community, our faculty, all of you here who are the community of justice for the AMED Studies. However, unfortunately, we do have an anti-labor. We do have a very non-transparent, unaccountable administration at San Francisco State. So the president vetoed the 3 resolutions that were taken by the faculty, prevented shared faculty governance. However, we're pursuing that. We are going to go for arbitration. We continue because it's very, very important for us to refuse to be silent, to continue to speak truth to power, to continue to insist that this is really important for us to educate and produce this knowledge and teach Palestine and reject the criminalization of Palestine that is happening by our university, in shutting down my course on Palestine coming up, in canceling our teaching Palestine, in attempting to criminalize what we are doing. We will not be silent. The same way, in the spirit of Shireen Abu Akleh, in the spirit of all of you who are struggling to keep Pacifica, a public related program, in the spirit of everybody who are struggling for labor rights against neoliberalism, Nazism, racism, white supremacy, and the attempt to kind of like incarcerate our thoughts and stop us from spreading truth. We are very much inspired by the indivisibility of justice, by everybody who's struggling, and we will continue. We're not going to stop, and we rely on all of you together that we will be able to honor the words of Shireen and all the people who fell in the struggle for justice, and to accomplish justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabab. Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, everyone. Thank you so much for your tireless struggles for justice for the past 15 years and beyond. I know how much of a toll it's taken on your health and your work, but I commend you and continue to struggle alongside you.
Our next speaker, Dr. CORNEL West, has been a leading force in speaking out for Palestinians and the defense of the Palestinian people. And this, for the Democrats, has been something you don't talk about. In fact, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. flipped on a position on the Palestinians under pressure. And it shows, again, the political dilemma and the political problem that the working class has, not having a political alternative that speaks out for the Palestinian workers and their rights. So Dr. CORNEL West has been an active participant in struggles. He's spoken out, and we would like to invite him to speak. He's also a candidate for the Greens, which I know in CNN and the major corporate media, they're very worried that he may actually get some support in play I mean, imagine people might be able to hear him and hear his voice. I mean, how dangerous can you get? And of course, they don't even want to debate in the Democratic Party. There's no such thing as a debate in the Democratic Party with other candidates, because Biden is the appointed candidate, and they don't want to have any question about who he is and who he represents. So welcome, Dr. Cornel West.
Well, Brother Steve, thank you so very much. I wouldn't want to be in any other place than here this morning. We've got the 10th anniversary of Black Lives Matter just in a few minutes here in Los Angeles. And so I'm going to make a move there, but I'm going to be here at least till 12 or so. But I want to salute you, Brother Steve. I want to salute my dear sister Nora for your leadership, consistent. I want to speak especially to my dear sister LINA. We want you to know that your courageous and visionary aunt shall never, ever, ever be forgotten. What you said about legends are never forgotten. People who love people who are oppressed and who are too often unloved by much of the world end up being remembered even more because of their courage. That's Sister Shireen. And so you should never, ever forget that in your own struggles. And many of us have memories of other names who we never, ever, ever forget. My dear sister, Dr. RABAB, I just hard to come up with a language for you in terms of your long distance running. What a marathoner you have been in San Francisco and other places, and still have that wonderful smile and that brilliant intellect and that fire on the inside. It makes all the difference in the world. Brother Zaid, good God Almighty. Sister Lisa, we could go on and on. When I think of how blessed I have been to be so very close to the great Edward Zaid. I met him in 1977. We worked together. We taught together with Iqbal Ahman and a whole host of others with Palestinian teach-ins in New York and Columbia in the 1980s and 90s. It will be 20 years in September that he passed, September 26, 2003. We shall never, ever forget our dear brother Edward. Pioneer. Security around his office at Columbia because of the death threats every day, every week when we break bread and have to go through the security in order to get to his classic Flaubert and Kafka and Joyce. You know, he was a very highbrow westernized intellectual who was in love with oppressed people. And he had some Jewish brothers like Jonathan Cole and others, of course, the great Noam Chomsky. One of the great distinctive features of the trade union movement is its internationalism. It's universal solidarity with those who are suffering, dominated, subjugated, and oppressed, no matter what nation, no matter what color, no matter what gender, no matter what sexual orientation. And with the American empire in such internal decay and external decline, we need that internationalism now more than ever, because so many of our folk are convinced there is no alternative, as the right-wing Margaret Thatcher used to say in the 80s. And when people feel there's no alternative, they look for neo-fascist Pied Pipers like Trump and company, because the neoliberal order is dying, but people are looking for a live option that is different than the present. I was so glad you mentioned Julian Assange. One of the things that, with God, Stuart Hull, my God. But one of the things that I would do, of course, one of the first things I would do would be to pardon Brother Julian Assange. I would pardon Brother Snowden. I would pardon Mumia Abu-Jamal, who had been so close to me. I've written 2 forewords for his works. I've had wonderful conversations with him in prison. I'm going to see him in prison with Chris Hedges and James Cone. Same would be true with Leonard Peltier. Same would be true for H. Rat Brown in Arizona, who's now at Iman, Al-Hameen, all the political prisoners. I want to welcome Sister Shakur, whose husband just died just 2 weeks ago, Matula Shakur, who of course was the parents of the great Tupac Shakur, one of the great artists of the last 50 years. who I knew when he was 10 years old in Brooklyn with Afena, his magnificent mother, who was a member of the Black Panther Party. But these pardons are simply ways of saying we are committed to truth, and the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. We are committed to justice, and justice means a deep love, care, and commitment to oppressed people, to do all you can to enact some kind of means by which they're able to feel empowered and be empowered. Any justice as only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. I come from a people who've been hated, and justice is not the proper response to hate. Love is. If you don't have love for the people, then justice will become just a market strategy. You won't be in it for the long run. If you don't have deep care and concern, it's just a market strategy. It's a career move. You won't be in it in the long run, and you won't be willing to live and die for it. That's what we're talking about here. Because when you're talking about Palestinian brothers and sisters, you're talking about a people who so much of the world has abandoned, because the most powerful empire in the history of the world, there's been 70 empires since the African early empires. United States is the 68th, and Sister Shireen is right, they come and go. But at a moment in which the American empire is so hegemonic, it's hard to raise voices to highlight those people who that empire wants to render their suffering invisible, to make sure nobody sees it, nobody hears their cries, nobody's in solidarity with them. Well, I can't wait. I tell my wife, you know, if and when I win, I'm not going to the White House till everybody has a house, because I'm an abolitionist when it comes to poverty and homelessness. But the important thing is BDS, boycott, divest, sanctions, isolation, withdrawal of military support. Not because I have any hatred of my precious Jewish brothers and sisters. No, I would do the same thing if there was a Palestinian occupation of Jewish brothers and sisters. This is a moral and spiritual issue. This is the vicious Israeli occupation of Palestinian brothers and sisters. And so that withdrawal, that boycott would be the proper response to any oppressed people. And for so long, the American empire has been on the side of the escalating, worse than apartheid conditions in West Bank, and the second class of sub-citizenship status of Palestinians within the Israeli state. It's within the Israeli state itself. We think, for example, of what has been happening in the Ukraine. I was just talking about this with a group, because I meet about 9 different groups every day now. And I was telling them, I say, you know, each baby, no matter what color or country, are precious. There's been over 200 babies killed in 500 days in the Ukraine, and the whole world talks about it. But 550 precious Palestinian babies can be killed in January 2014, and it's hard to find any politician in America, any major leader in America, to say a mumbling word about those precious deaths. That's the level of not just hypocrisy, but cowardliness, scared, intimidated, refusing to lift one's voice, as if when your baby gets killed, you want others to raise your voice. But no, when Palestinian babies are killed, you don't want to say a mumbling word. That's precisely what needs to be lifted, spotlight. And that's why I raise the issue every TV appearance, every radio appearance. People say, how come you're so preoccupied with the Palestinians? Well, I say a lot about Dalits too. I say a lot about gypsies too. And I sure say a lot about Black people and indigenous people and white poor. But the Palestinian issue is the litmus test these days. In the way South Africa was the litmus test in the 1980s of what it means to be an internationalist of any substance and of any seriousness. And so I'm very, very blessed to be here. And as I said before, I'm gonna have to make a quick run at 12. I'm staying as late as I can, but I've got to deal with this traffic, get into LA in order to give this keynote address with the Black Lives Matter. But thank you, sir, so much for allowing me to be here. And you all just stay strong in what you're doing. I'm telling you, very much so.
Thank you, Dr. Cornel West, for your comments and solidarity with the Palestinian people, and to raise it in your political campaign. Whether one agrees with you or not, in your election campaign, raising that issue is fundamental for any politician in the United States who has principles and honesty about the subjugation of the people of Palestine with the support of the United States government and military. Our next speaker has been on the front lines in the unions in the United States fighting for Palestinians. And when I say that, you think about how many, 12 million workers in the United States, the AFL-CIO, the Teamsters, or many, many unions. In all of these unions, there are very few trade unionists in these unions, including in my union, the CWA and the Journalists Union, who actually stand up and speak out for Palestinians. And that's exactly what we're speaking to. Elizabeth MILOS is an interpreter. She's a member of the CWA UPTE, Union of Professional and Technical Employees at UCSF. She was a delegate to the San Francisco Labor Council and outspoken for Palestinian people against the repression and against the relationship of the AFL-CIO to the Histadrut, which is the Israeli Trade Union Federation, which they support. It's a apartheid trade union organization that supports the apartheid policies. In fact, it supported the apartheid regime in South Africa, the Histadrut, and actually was manufacturing arms and military equipment in South Africa, supporting the apartheid regime. This is the Histadrut, with the support of the Israeli government. And unbeknownst to most, that the AFL-CIO was also supporting the apartheid regime. Chief Buthelezi and Inkatha were given millions of dollars to organize armed gangs of thugs who then murdered South African trade unionists in COSATU who were organizing unions. Elizabeth is also on the board of KPFA, the local station board. She returned after she was illegally removed from the board in an effort to silence her. She got her position back. And since that time, the KPFA has put on Ian Masters, who's a propagandist for the CIA and the FBI. I don't believe he's on 9 hours a week on KPFA. And I don't ever believe he's had a Black person on as a guest or a Latino on as a guest. So they put I would say, a racist and a supporter of US imperialism on the air at KPFA. And Elizabeth, at the last board meeting, raised this and asked the manager there why he had appointed this guy. And the manager, Antonio, said, well, it was easy to do because they did their own editing for his program. So 9 hours a week, there's no Palestinian program. There are segments, but they've got time for Ian Masters. So there's going to be a slate called Rescue Pacifica, which I'm a part of, and also Elizabeth is a part of, that's running in the KPFA election. And she has taken up a fight, as I said, in her union, UPTE, and in the San Francisco Labor Council, and faced numerous obstacles, which she's going to be talking about. So welcome to our program, Elizabeth.
Hello, thank you very much. I feel very honored to be right after Dr. West. It's kind of humbling. I would like to say that I'm also Chilean American and I'm recovering from COVID. I'm Chilean American, and I'm among the other things that Steve mentioned regarding Israel. I became aware early on of Israeli apartheid's role in selling arms to Pinochet in the 70s, as well as in the 80s, they sold arms to the Rios Montt government as well, to Guatemala. The United States that used Israel as its state to sell through via those means when it wasn't allowed to sell the arms directly. What I wanted to say is I was a member of the San Francisco Labor Council as a delegate from UPTE, my union of University and Professional and Technical Employees, CWA 9119. I'm a medical interpreter at UCSF. In the San Francisco Bay Area, we had in May 19th, 2021, there was the United Educators of San Francisco delegates meeting had passed a really good resolution in favor of Palestine, in favor of BDS, which was very hard hit by media, but the educators stood strong, the delegates stood strong. And after that, our union, through its Social Justice Committee, passed a resolution and sent it to the Executive Board for June 2nd, a BDS resolution as well, and to stop military aid and specifically to break ties with Histadrut as well. As a member of the Labor Council, we had decided we had decided in the Social Justice Committee that we would send it to the Labor Council, and so I joined forces with members of many different unions. I have it here on the screen if you want me to share the screen about the actual resolution that we presented to the Labor Council on June 14th, 2021, which incorporated the immense wellspring, the immense emerging younger people that were joining the unions. There was now Unite Here, Local 23, representing 25,000 hospitality workers across southern and southwestern US, had issued a statement in solidarity with Palestinians and their struggle against oppression and justice. Teamsters Local 804 from New York City, which represented 8,000 workers, mostly UPS workers, drivers. The News Guild also had made which represented 24,000 journalists across North America, called the May 15th Israeli Defense Force intentional bombing of Gaza Tower, housing the offices of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera, a blatant attack on press freedom. Google members, all this resolution incorporated all the different unions throughout the country that have been voicing their concerns and their opposition to Israeli apartheid in many different ways. Some calling it apartheid, some not, but most calling for an end to the aid. And when we presented this resolution, we had joined together with many different unions, delegates from the Labor Council, including OPEIU, AFT 2121, SEIU, APWU, IBU, ILW, the Inland Boat Workers Union. There was signatories from the Media Guild, as well as from YATSE and LACLA, as well as my union and California Faculty Association and the letter carriers and the NUHW, as well as supported by for ID titles, the president of ILWU Local 10, and the retirees, Clarence Thomas from ILWU Local 10 as well, and Marcus Holder and Christopher Christensen from ILWU. They were all present in this resolution. And we encountered difficulties in being able to get the necessary people into the Labor Council. At the same time, we were dealing with we were in communication with many different organizations. This came during the period of time, or right after the period of time that in May had been the Block the Boat. I'm sorry, not the Block the Boat, the meeting that had been happening on a nationwide level in trying to stop this from happening. This meeting happened at the level of Labor Against War and Racism. And we try to get as many people involved in this as possible by sending notices to all the different members of the Arabic organizations as well, and an answer as well. And unfortunately, the delegates who had been recently voted in at the UESF as delegates to be the delegates, the new executive board, were not able to be sworn in until later, until after the vote. They were voted in, I believe, in August. They had decided they were going to be voted in August. The situation that we encountered was very disheartening, because when we presented this resolution, we immediately got tabled by an AIPAC supporter from Local 87, Olga Miranda, who is an openly AIPAC supporter, and the committee that was supposedly assigned to it, the member of the executive board, Susan Solomon, from UESF at the time. She had not been elected to the new board, but she was still in the executive board. She was given co-chairman of this committee, and basically it was sent to redraft this resolution. My union had already passed a resolution, but we had decided among the delegates to present this new resolution because it incorporated all the different unions from the country and incorporated all the delegates. It was a contribution from all the delegates that signed on to it. And this was sent immediately to committee, and supposedly there was going to be something coming out of it that would reflect the agreements of making it a resolution that the San Francisco Labor Council could pass. But our bottom line was it had to include BDS and stopping aid to Israel. Well, immediately after that, we had Rudy Gonzalez from the Building and Trade state publicly in a Jewish bulletin, I believe, that BDS is off the table, and basically denigrating the resolution and not supporting it, even though he was supposed to be part of the team that was going to be working on this new committee to do this. And of course, what happened afterwards was that we got a letter from the AFL-CIO prohibiting the Labor Council from even discussing this resolution. This was an official letter with the letterhead of the AFL-CIO stating that the AFL-CIO does not permit the Labor Council to cover issues where they have already taken a policy decision. And this goes against the Labor Council, the San Francisco Labor Council history of of being able to present its positions, its political positions, even from the days of the Vietnam War. They opposed the Vietnam War while the Labor Council, while the AFL-CIO had supported the Vietnam War. Well, as a result of what happened in the Labor Council, we were not able to bring that forward. But as Professor Rabib mentioned, we were able to bring it forward. It had to do with the labor issues at San Francisco State, which was a really good victory there, in being able to protect that as well. But they were not able to stop that because that directly had to do with labor issues here in San Francisco. And what happened basically after that was we had agreed at the Social Justice Committee that we were going to take our resolution. We were going to take, right, the Department of Equity and Inclusion, correct. We had agreed that we were going to take our resolution to the CWA convention, which was going to be in, yes, Nora, I will be providing links to those or the actual documents instead, because I'll explain in a minute about the link to the resolution. The resolution that my union passed, we were going to bring that one to the CWA convention, but because there was other resolutions that had been passed by the Colorado branch of the CWA, as well as other CWA chapters, there was a decision to join forces and create a new one, in which I wrote one up, I drafted one up, which included Histadrut, included all the different things, as well as footnotes, because, you know, be honest, we knew that it did not have a chance of passing, but we wanted it to make sure that we included as much information as possible so that when it could be in the hands of our delegates, which was, by the way, the CWA convention last year was, last time was through Zoom. So there was no way of talking with people directly. And they, well, we had a meeting with the resolutions committee and they listened to us, and we had people come into the resolutions committee to speak in favor of this resolution. And we had a very long meeting, which was very interesting because it seemed like they were really listening at that time. However, once it was brought to the floor, unfortunately, the same members of my delegation, one of the members who was the chair of the Peace and Justice Committee, actually refused to second that motion, the motion of me bringing it to the floor. She felt that it did not have enough support, and so she didn't think it was going to be worth doing it. I got the second from somebody from outside of my delegation. And after that, we did not have a social justice committee anymore at the system-wide level in my committee, in my union, after October of 2021, after the CWA convention. At that CWA convention, mind you, I also saw there was a resolution that they had presented, that CWA had presented, giving money to the so-called Solidarity Center to support union organizing in authoritarian regimes such as Colombia, Philippines, and they mentioned Cuba. And so I basically did a motion to strike. I wasn't going to be able to get rid of that entire resolution, of course. So I did a motion to strike Cuba off of the word there, and I gave a 5-minute speech, and where I did expose the AFL-CIO's involvement in interference and interventions through the National Endowment for Democracy and in support of Cuba, and also expose them for their role in Chile. And so I took that opportunity to do so, and the word Cuba was basically the motion to strike did not pass, but another member of the CWA was able to get rid of all of the names of the countries that were listed there. So we were able to at least get rid of that. So after the CWA October 2021 meeting, convention, the Social Justice Committee ceased to exist. There was no meeting, even though my repeated attempts to get it started again, sending emails to the new president that we had. And then recently, I mean, the whole website was changed. And so as somebody's asking me for links, I can provide you with the actual documents, but not with the link to our website, because the resolutions that were passed by all the resolutions that were passed by my union's conventions have been deleted from the website. And they're still discussing of whether or not they're going to include it. That includes resolutions that we passed against the privatized retirement systems in Chile, which was in March 2019. It includes the resolutions that we passed against Energy Transfer Partners, Standing Rock, after I went there and presented the resolution afterwards to the convention in 2017, sorry, it was a January one. And that includes also resolution, the recent one in October 2021, I'm sorry, in the last year's resolution at my convention was around the privatization of Laguna Honda. So all of those different resolutions have been disappeared, as well as all of the historic resolutions from the San Francisco Labor Council. You go on the Labor Council, and I still have not been able to find the resolutions, the historic resolutions that have been going, that the Labor Council has been creating, has done in these past few years. It's much more notorious than just progressives except for Palestine. The situation is that they're silencing the votes of the rank and file. They're silencing the votes of convention decisions, which supposedly, according to most union bylaws, are the law of the land. In other words, they're higher than any president or any, it should be the highest power of any union delegation is the actual conventions and the decisions that are made at the convention level. Unfortunately, the last convention at my union, I was not able to be a delegate. I was isolated from being a delegate. In March 8th, I was taken out of being a San Francisco Labor Council delegate by my own union executive committee. They had been getting a lot of complaints by the executive committee of the Labor Council against me. And the last one was due to a resolution that I had tried to bring forth for Mumia, where the Labor Council refused to pass that vote on Mumia. Refused to, and they voted against the resolution. Unfortunately, some of the people who we consider allies also voted against it. And I can only say that this is not only disheartening, but it seems that we really need to get our unity going. We need to be united in our struggle, and especially when it comes to internationalism. And the issue of internationalism is also something very strong that we brought forward regarding the ILWU and the anti-privatization. People don't realize that it hits home. It hits home directly. People in Chile suffered targeting of the eyes. Journalists got targeted in the eyes. 500 people had loss of one eye through the police. That's the same tactic that the Chilean police learned from Israel, as well as the United States. I mean, they teach each other, basically. The Israeli army are targeting people's legs and knees and making people disabled for life. The same could be said with the shot in the eye squad of people that got shot in the eye during the George Floyd protest by police and by tear gas canisters. Jewish Voice for Peace put out a very important, the Deadly Exchange report, which shows exactly how much training happens and how much military equipment gets passed from the Israeli apartheid regime to the US and attacks Black and brown people here. So the issue of solidarity is very important, and it's directly tied to Zionism, to neo-Nazism as well. The same people that unfortunately are gaining ground in Chile at this moment, which is the neo-Nazi enclave, Felipe Cast, are the same ones who back in the day, AFL-CIO paid these trucker owners $50 a day to strike against the Allende government. In the south of Chile, specifically, they have an enclave called APRA, an association of business leaders of the forestry companies that are attacking the Mapuche communities and militarizing the Mapuche people in Chile, and using tactics against the October 2019 protests, using sodium hydroxide in the water cannons, which burned people's skin. Those are the same kind of tactics that have been used against Palestinians. We are all in this fight together. And if we do not stick together, we will die, literally die. And we need to stay strong and united as much as we can. And because we have one enemy, and that's the important thing that we need to understand. Thank you. I'm not sure how much time I have left, so I didn't want to take too much time.
Okay, maybe you can wrap it up, because we do want to have some questions and comments of our participants, and not only our participants, but our attendees. So why don't can you wrap it up briefly?
Yeah, I guess I would like to leave some space for comments, or questions instead. Yeah, I'll allow people to. Do you think I missed anything? If anybody thinks I missed something,
well, I do want to add that thanks for your report, and it's obviously this is the only place that this is going to be heard, because this is not just about Palestine and Chile. It's about what's going on right here in our own unions, and who's doing what in our own unions. So that is a critical question. But also, I think that there's a group called Labor Education Project and AFL-CIO International Operations, which is going to be having an educational conference on September the 10th in Washington, D.C. on these issues of the role of the AFL-CIO in Israel, in South Africa, in Chile, and in Mexico. On the September the 11th, there's going to be a rally actually at the AFL-CIO on the 50th anniversary of the Chilean coup to open the books, to end the $75 million a year that the AFL-CIO gets from the National Endowment for Democracy, to hold accountable the AFL-CIO leadership for actually helping to kill and jail thousands of trainees in Chile and many other countries, because most workers in the United States are unaware of that. So I would hope that Dr. Cornel West could participate on the September 11th and the 50th anniversary of the coup in Chile, to let people know there's another 9/11, which most Americans are unaware of, that happened in Chile, which was the overthrow of that government. So when we talk about overthrowing governments, here's an example for the American people about the AFL-CIO and the US government overthrowing the elected government in Chile. So I think that that's, if people could.
I just wanted to add one last thing, if I can. Yeah. It's also very, very troubling to see that so-called progressives on the KPFA, protectors, who was running under the protectors in KPFA, they refuse, on the LSB, they refuse to support Frank Sterling, who's a Native American man who's a journalist who was attacked by police in Antioch, and we put a resolution to get his support by KPFA directly. And unfortunately, they refused that, but they took away the program called First Voice Apprenticeship Program, which was Frank Sterling's, he's a technical director of that program, a very important social justice program that was set up for teaching young people for broadcasting and social justice issues. And instead, they gave 9 hours a week to Ian Masters' program. Ian Masters, as a CIA linked person who brings forth CIA and FBI people, and who believes that Mumia Abu Jamal is guilty. And who was on KPFK previously, and who had asked people not to donate to KPFK, and was participating and continues to participate in trying to destroy Pacifica. People need to realize the power of media and how it affected the vote in Chile, and by these incredible bots that were used, and the media conglomerates, and the amount of money that was poured into trying to convince people to vote against the new constitution that had been presented and had been created by the Constitutional Convention. So it is very troubling in the level of support that this guy Ian Masters has, and I just want you to say, want you to know that that we need to make sure we address this, because people go around with progressive faces, but in essence they are destroying they're trying to destroy the one remaining terrestrial independent radio network in the country, Pacifica. So we're asking people to vote not against New Day, against the protectors and Pacifica Safety Net, and in favor of those who are fighting for a united Pacifica. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our first speaker, Carol Lang, is a professor at CUNY, where there has also been an attack on Palestinian American professors. So it's important that we know about that. So Carol?
Hi, everybody. Whatever you guys are suffering in San Francisco, it's all over the country. I mean, there's a policy that's anti-Palestinian, and it's not only unspoken, but it's spoken. So a number of years back, during another atrocity, every day there's an atrocity. I'm on the International Committee of my union, which is the Professional Staff Congress. We wrote a resolution in defense of the Palestinians and in opposition to the Israeli attacks. I mean, eventually we mostly agreed on the wording. And as soon as we put it out there to get the executive committee to vote on it, it was like, no way, man, were they going to vote on it? And not only were they not going to vote on it, or they voted against it, but there was a lot of backlash. So we have newspapers in New York, like the Daily News, that are, taking pictures of people who are raising their hands in support of Palestine. I mean, it was really bizarre. And so the resolution never went anywhere. People threatened to drop out of the union. 200 people dropped out of the union, and our attitude was, if you're this reactionary, please leave. So we weren't upset at all about it. But just recently, at the last law school graduation in New York, there was a woman whose name is Fatima Mohammed, who was elected to give the talk to the graduating class, and she it was wonderful. She talked about Israeli apartheid and how it supported South African apartheid, and how we're a social justice school, so we want to fight for social justice for everybody. And anybody, it's in YouTube, you can listen to it. As soon as she gave that talk, she got lots and lots of death threats. She was in hiding for some time. And we all wrote two things happened after that that were important in my union. Some of us wrote another resolution in support of Fatima. And we had asked that the chancellor, the mayor, the chancellor, everybody came out swinging against Fatima. She was a racist, and she was prejudiced and anti-Semitic, and the whole, litany of attacks. And instead of my union standing up and defending her, we had to force the principled officers to write something as milquetoast as you could possibly find. We support the right of free speech. They didn't mention her name. They didn't mention what was happening to her, none of that. So at the last delegate assembly meeting, the resolution that people supported, we tried to get onto the agenda. And in order to be able to get it onto the agenda, it was a new business. So we wanted to get it to the top of the agenda. There had to be 2/3 vote in support of moving the agenda. In the meantime, now we have no meetings because it's the summer. So there's nothing, to support Fatima, even though there's a lot of, people are doing different things in order to support her. But the unions, which has the millions of people in them, that has the ability to get the word out as far and wide as they can, has made a decision not to hear that resolution until September. And who knows what's going to happen between now and then. But their response to the chancellor and the mayor, who attacked her viciously, was absolutely milquetoast. So, it's like with everything else that they do, which is absolutely nothing. They basically, they don't even fight for their own members. I'm not even going to go into what's happening at CUNY because it's so awful. And probably if you know what's happening in San Francisco, you know what's happening at CUNY. It's the same kind of attacks, especially we're a working class Black Latin school, right? The same. But come September, we're going to definitely mobilize and make sure that resolution is on the top of the agenda as opposed to a new business, because if the union leadership has anything to do with anything, they'll bury the resolution. They'll put it to a place where it's impossible to get to because the agenda is too long. And so as reactionary as there are a number of people in my union who are really Zionists, there are lots of people, activists, who are especially energized around this particular question of the Palestinians. And so I have every expectation that there'll be more movement in September, since everything is right. Nothing happens in the summer, right? Except for the contract and all of that, right? All that. But I have every expectation that things will pick up again in September and will be on the move in terms of defending Palestinians and defending Fatima in particular. And defending the right to free speech, because other than that, then, once essentially, the response was, well, everybody has the right to have free speech. I mean, it's as absurd as everyone has the right to breathe, more, unless you're a Palestinian. But I have every expectation that things are going to pick up, and at least I hope they do. And I know that there are lots of people in the union who want to defend Palestinians and are very, very anti-Zionist. So, that's what's happening at the City University right now.
Orlando, and then Dr. RABAB ABDULHADI. Orlando, you're on.
Yes, I'm Orlando out of Oakland, and I know about this, but I'm getting educated. I'm a Green Party member, Green Party County Council. I'm on the National State Committee, ran for mayor of Oakland twice, helped create the municipal city ID card, group homes, county GLC rate, continues for everything you can imagine. But my main question is, for me as a new learner, how can I educate my people to use the safety part of it to spread their message without worrying about COINTELPRO and those who are trying to come in and infiltrate a great organization? What are some of the measures and steps that as young folks we should take to educate our people, but not after bringing that effect to disrupt the whole cause? To all the panelists, that's
RABAB, I'm sure you can answer that with your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually going to just ask actually one question to maybe raise it to everybody, but specifically maybe to LINA and Said in particular, but to everybody. And so I'll say it and I'll make a couple of comments. One, the question is that where have been a lot of media organizations? I mean, a lot of media organizations have historically spoken up, but sometimes they get very afraid, I would say, or claim to be afraid. And it's connected with the second points that I wanted to say, is that I don't think anything is accidental, and I think we really need to demystify the processes. All of this stuff, all of the use of the bureaucracy, all the creation of committees, all of this kind of like this, none of it is accidental, even the timing. Every single attack we've been targeted, and I've actually tracked them, have been before holidays. Like either, for example, the Thanksgiving, the first attack in 2013 was right before. They waited about 3 weeks to do it because people are going off on a holiday. So then by the time we come back, it's December, semester is going to close, people will go off. Then they come back and people forget about it. And this is the same thing. The lawfare lawsuit was filed on June 17, 2016. This is 17. This is all, each one of them is not accidental. What Professor Carol is speaking about, same thing. They do this all the time, creating of committees, creating of things. At San Francisco State, we see it all the time. They'll come up and they say it's policy. And we say, when did this policy come about? And they'll say, this is what it is. And I say, when? Exactly when? And then you track it and you see, why did they create this policy? And then they try to do it retroactively. And it's very interesting. It's actually, we're talking about Zionism and Israel, to see how Israel creates facts on the ground and how all repressive forces do that, which takes me to the second point. It's not actually about only speaking about Israel. All repressive forces collude with each other. They all study, in Arabic we say, they all have the same kind of like, they memos, they coordinate with each other. I think if we actually watch the whole question about capacity that's happening now to actually reinforce the collaboration of security apparatus, police, military, and so on. I think somebody, I don't know who, Lisa, you spoke about the deadly exchange, about the Anti-Defamation League, bringing US Israeli military and police along with the police chiefs, such as the former chief of Ferguson, where Brown was killed. Anyway, and so on and so forth. There is this kind of the stuff, they all collaborate with each other. They also collaborate in the ways in which they want to contain movements, and they also collaborate in the ways in which they actually pay bribes in order for them to waive the carrot and the stick. And if you say no to the carrot, then the stick comes down. And it's very clear in our case. It's very clear in every other case. But then there is also the whole question of exceptionalizing Palestine, exceptionalizing Israel, exceptionalizing the tragedy of the Holocaust, presenting everything as exceptional, because once you do that, you isolate Palestine and you say, you know what, this is an isolated case, don't worry about it, it doesn't really concern you. And we come back and we say to them, no, the indivisibility of justice, this is all about justice. This is about justice for all. So don't actually ask us to rank which cause is more important than the other. Every single human life is important. Every single ecosystem is important. We're against greed, we're against exploitation, we're against this whole lack of transparency and so on. And I think so in that sense also, we really, and I think also as we demystify the forces that repress us, we also need to uplift all the various solidarities that brought us together, the ways in which, I mean, the amazing collaboration and solidarity that has been expressed by so many trade unionists towards Palestinian labor workers, and also the destructive role of the Histadrut that's now threatening Netanyahu that they're going to go on strike and so on. But we haven't heard a single word about the ways that they repress Palestinian workers. They deduct their fees, they take, and they don't provide them with any services whatsoever. Nothing. No Palestinian workers have any services from this supposedly labor organization. And then I think we need to also compare what happens with the AFL-CIO, because AFL-CIO does the same thing. Again, they read on the same book, they collaborate, they are part and parcel of the system. This is really very problematic. And so the whole question of union democracy, the whole question of transparency, the whole question of holding our leadership accountable. I mean, I go by my union. I love my colleagues in the California Faculty Association at San Francisco State University, because everything is open, everything is transparent, everything is accountable. When we go, they actually say, yes, we can do this, we cannot do this, and this is, and we're struggling. And I think also we need to bring California State University, the largest public system in the United States, along with the CUNY, the second largest, and we need to collaborate with the PSC. Our CFA and PSC need to come together, and there are a lot of efforts to do that, but we haven't gotten to actually doing them more. Part of it has to do with all the obstacles we face. But I think also this is something maybe, I don't know, Saeed, maybe we would have some discussion with other like media people who are, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but because Al-Quds actually, you do a great job, and Al-Quds is doing much better reporting than, you know, and then we have, of course, Al Jazeera, we have a whole bunch of people. The media in Palestine is doing an amazing job with very little resources. I think we need to uplift these things more, because if we only talk about the repression, people get very demoralized. And this is exactly the intentions of the Zionists and the powers that repress us, to produce narratives of submission, subjugation, and defeat. To say, Palestinians, you have nobody to support you, you're all on your own, and then to say to the rest of the world, don't support Palestinians. It's not really a worthy cause. But on the contrary, actually, there is so much support and rising support with Palestine that specifically makes the Zionists so troubled. In the sense, this is why they're getting nastier and nastier. They're bullies. They're getting nastier and nastier, and I expect more. By the way, I think the next period is going to even get worse than that. But I think it is the fact that we have everybody around the world in support, and everybody fighting for the question of justice. And if there is an attack on anybody in anywhere, George Floyd gets murdered and executed, the word rises. Iyad Halak gets killed in Jerusalem, the word rises. We hold people accountable. I think it's really, really important for us to think about BDS as not only a policy around holding Israel accountable, but all those who collaborate with Israel and enable the repression of Palestine, the colonialism to continue, the killing and the attacks to continue. I think it's really, really important for us to make all these connections and expose all this garbage that's going on, all these ties, the bureaucracies that they use, and also call out members of our own communities who act as native informants, who enable and facilitate the repression of our own people, and say this is not acceptable. It's happening in Palestine day in and day out. It's amazing how people are standing up. So I think we need to actually, there's so much work that we need to do, but I think we are actually on the side of history, and there is so much more stuff that's going on. So I think this is kind of saying, what do we need to do? Look at the whole campaign around Fatima. And by the way, Fatima is not even Palestinian. She's Yemeni, right? She's a student who was selected by her colleagues. Look at the stuff for the movement for Black Lives. Look at the Chicano movement, the labor movement, the anti-Zionist Jewish comrades and friends, the indigenous communities. I mean, there is so much support everywhere you go. There is so much support that actually really overwhelms and that's why the Zionists are working extra hard to crush us. So I think we really need to act I'm not saying exaggerate, I'm just saying we need to bring all the parts together and keep making that much more, and hold much more of these conversations with each other and work together. Thanks.
Thank you. Also, I would add that there are 50,000 CSU workers who may be going on a possible strike because there's a privatization and attack on the workers at the CSU system. They also want to raise tuition fees 5% for working class students. This is in a state with all these billionaires, multi-billionaires, Zuckerberg and others, and they're saying to the students, you have to go into debt to pay your fees. They should be free, but the Democrats and the capitalists have privatized public education, and they're attacking the professors, they're attacking the staff. So the CFA, the IBT, there may be a strike of these workers. And I think that those people who support Palestinians, support workers around the world, need to join with the workers and tie this together. One of the interesting points is that the AFL-CIO, our union, the CWA, my union, not a word about the trillions of dollars going to military all over the world, the 800 bases. Why is it that the education unions, the public worker unions, don't say a word about all this money going to war, going to US imperialism, while workers are suffering, while health care is suffering? People don't have health care. People can't get into college. They don't have money to fix the heat at CUNY. They don't have money to fix the heat and air conditioning at San Francisco City College, but they have trillions for war. I mean, it is part of capitalism. This is what we're talking about. And I think the strike wave that's going on, the Screen Actors Guild joining the writers, and the Teamsters, UPS going out, we have to unite with these struggles, because these workers have the power to challenge where money is going, where capitalism is putting its attack, and say, no, we're going to unite the workers in this country with the workers in Palestine, with the workers in Chile. This is an international struggle, totally an international struggle. And I think that is very important. Howard had his hand up and from CUNY, and he had some comments in the chat. Did you want to? Okay, Howard, do you want to speak on what's going on? Oh, one point I would add, as far as what can you do in Oakland, a resolution to Oakland City Council for Shireen, justice for Shireen would be good.
I'm thinking of all the students and faculty that have been attacked by the Canary Project, which is a secretive organization. And you can't get back at them, really. And they post things like on Facebook about you, a bunch of lies. And they're doing this to thousands of students. I'm more concerned about them than me and other faculty members across the country who support the Palestinian resistance. And I think something should be done about these people. They need to be exposed. And that's what I want to say. Is there another terrible organization? Okay, that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah. Why shouldn't I say it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Elizabeth?
one of the ways that we could expose them is there's this documentary, I'm sure most of you have already seen it here, called The Lobby from Al Jazeera, which exposes the Canary mission. It exposes them, exposes the level of how they attack students and things like that. And I think the more that this gets brought out, through social media. It's a way of basically exposing them for who they are. That's just a suggestion.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments that people would like to make in the panel?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, but would love to really continue this conversation and work together after this call. So thank you all so much for being here and all your energy and words and sharing your struggle. So much this history gets erased and never seen or heard from. Their job is done, effectively, as they're trying to do, to silence us and to erase that history. So it is critical that we continue to stay in contact and connect through our struggles and build solidarity. If you have any needs for support, just reach out to us. We can all support each other, whether it's, writing letters or calling our people, or rallying or shutting shit down, excuse my language. So that's what the level of militancy I believe we need right now. And I see your hand, Saeed. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know that you can please reach out to me and to help connect folks and continue this work together. Put my email in the chat. It's righttoreturn@gmail.com. So thank you all for being
here. And also we are going to continue this education campaign. I think this is a very historic meeting that we had today, which hasn't been held. And that is the attack on Palestinian American journalists, Palestinian press, and also on Palestinians and other people, activists in academic community who are fighting together against the Zionist attack and for the right of Palestinians. So this meeting is very important. We should get it out. We've videotaped it, and we should get it out widely and begin the campaign in the working class and the unions to tie the struggle that's going on all over this country, all over the world, of working people with the struggle of Palestinian workers and people. And I think that we have to make those direct connections and build that solidarity. Nancy, you have your hand up.
I see Saeed has been waiting to speak.
Saeed,
and
okay, Saeed, why don't you add in all of it?
Yeah, I just, very briefly, because Rabab mentioned something that is really very, very important that we never talked about. And that is, the rights of Palestinian workers in Israel. Over the years, there is not a single benefit that these workers get. They have no protection. They have no safety. They have no health care. They have nothing. They go, they work. It's almost slave labor, especially women. I mean, women that go and from Gaza, from places like this, and they risk their life, pregnant, not pregnant. I mean, I could tell hundreds of stories that go and work in the settlements, work in Israeli factories and so on, and they never get any rights. This is a topic that is completely overlooked, completely non-reported anywhere. And I think it's very important because literally dozens of Palestinians die every year in the workplace in Israeli factories and settlements that go unreported. They don't get any benefits whatsoever. Thank you very kindly for allowing me to say this.
Well, Saeed, maybe we could have a panel on that, education panel on that future with Palestinian workers and with American trade unions, make that direct connection, because I think that the best way, the most powerful way to link up workers in the United States with the struggle of workers around the world and in Palestine is direct discussion and struggle over what their concrete issues are. And the slave labor conditions of Palestinian workers is an issue to workers in the United States and all workers.